Welcome to Mormonish, everybody. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon.
And we have a absolutely amazing guest today. We have writer-director Brent Bokovoy with us in the house. How are you today, Brent?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
That's right. We need to applaud. This is a whirlwind weekend for Brent because it was the world premiere of his amazing film, Ronald's Little Factory. And this is why we're having him on to talk about this. I'm going to start by just reading his bio very quickly, and then we're going to jump right in because I got to attend this premiere and I have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't even know if we're going to let the guests talk. We may not because we're just...
Sounds good to me.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right. So let me just introduce Brent really quick. Brent Bokovoy is an award-winning filmmaker from San Diego, California. His short films have won or been nominated for awards from the Eli Roth's Halloween Horror Nights with Universal Studios, the Rue Morgue magazine, and the San Diego Film Awards. He just completed his first feature film, the dark comedy Ronald's Little Factory. Brent is currently preparing to take his feature film on a limited theatrical tour across the U.S. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you.
What a great name for a film, too. Anyone who's familiar with Boyd K. Packer's Little Factory Talk, it just screams, "Come see me, ex-Mormons."
Yeah.
It absolutely does. So why don't we start by you just telling us a little bit about you and sort of your background, and then we'll delve into how this project even started.
Sure. So I was raised in the church, in the LDS church, and I was the perfect Mormon boy. I went on a mission to Seattle and had a great time. And about a year later, I was at the temple, and I was never, even though I loved the church, I was never a big fan of the temple. I always felt uncomfortable there. But one time I was in the temple, and my turning point was that a day, year after my mission, I was in the celestial room, and for some reason, just the most random thought came to me that, so I was looking at, of course, everyone dressed in their unique clothing, and being inside this $100 million place in San Diego, and underneath a chandelier that's probably hundreds of $1,000s. So this is so I even in my mind I use the word this is so gaudy for some reason right now. Like I feel more at peace and closer to God being out in the mountains than right here. And like I was blown away just having that thought, because that was really the first time in my mind I ever thought of something that went against the LDS church. So I really pondered that for a long time. And then I started thinking, if that enters into my mind, and like I feel, that's against the traditional church teachings, how many other things, if I really start pondering, would they go against the church teaching? So I spent about a year of my life deciding to read about the church, other churches, other religions, and I just came to the conclusion that it's not what the LDS church is not what I originally thought it was. So I left, just 2 years after my mission. So I've been out almost 20 years.
So not godly, but gaudy is what you arrived
Gaudy,
at.
exactly.
And that was the first. It's amazing how different little thoughts like that for different people, what it takes. It is a little moment like that where you just go, interesting. There's kind of like a break in your cognitive dissonance, and that kind of opens the door. So,
Yeah.
and you were, I think your brother David said you were the first one in your family. So that must have been a little shocking to them, maybe disturbing. How did they treat you? You seem like a very close family. At the premiere, a lot of your family was there, got to kind of see the interaction. Everybody was so supportive of the film. So I wonder, what was it like early on when you were the first one to say, nope, I'm opting out?
It was super disturbing. It was disturbing for me. I was not happy because it felt like the rug was pulled underneath my feet, and so it was really not a fun time. And I'm also envious of people that have left in the last few years, because there's such a great community online and so many post Mormons.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of that 20 years ago. I didn't know any. I literally did not have one friend that had left or family member that I could talk to. So it's not fun 20 years ago. But what I always tell people that have left recently and don't have many family or friends that have left, I say that I did not have anyone, but at the time, my three best friends and my two brothers, some of the closest people I were. So those five people have all left since then. So it does get better, and people are leaving all the time, and
Yeah.
it's a great community out there.
So you were like a
Oh,
pioneer kind of, and that's wonderful that your family, they might not have understood, but they still loved you. You can tell. So what they were
Yeah,
saying.
my parents and my sister's family are still very active. Um, so yeah, they're but actually my parents have been really surprisingly not really surprisingly, but I'm proud of them for being supportive of me. And of course, I'm not going to show them, and I try to be respectful on like sharing it with them. But they asked me about it, and they're happy that I made it, and well, not necessarily that film, but they're happy that I'm getting it out there, and just they want to see me succeed. So
Right.
I
And
was going to ask that because how do you go from, leaving the church is one thing, making a film called Ronald's Little Factory about Boyd K. Talker's pack, a feature length film about that, it is a whole nother. How did you get from point A to point B? Obviously, with your awards and stuff, you were involved with films. How did you get into doing films, and what led you back to this path 20 years later?
so how I first started, actually, so about 5 years ago, I wrote a I wrote a short screenplay with my friend Ryan Williamson. He's one of my best friends from high school. He's one of the people that I said that he was very active when I left, and he was not very happy that I left. He was very sad, but he ended up leaving about 10 years ago. And so we wrote a script about 5 years ago, and it was actually based on Joseph Smith and the Helen Mar Kimball story. And it was it was a drama, but it was a short story. I still would like to make it. And we were pretty proud of the script. And actually we were talking at the time, my friend said, "Hey, I like where this is a really cool script. I think we could write really any type of screenplay together." And then he said, "I don't know if we could do a comedy." And then I said, "Oh, we could definitely do a dark comedy." And then he said, "What do you mean a dark comedy?" And then I just threw this out randomly. I said, dark comedy, meaning like maybe picture someone that is like trying, that's really tempted to masturbate, but he ends up cutting off his hands, and like that's a dark comedy. And
Yeah.
then my buddy said, "Oh, then we could bring up Boyd K. Packer's talking that." And then that's when the light bulb went off. And then I said, "Oh, that is so brilliant! I'm going to write like a 3-page screenplay on that." So I wrote a short story from that, and then I never made the short story, but I started thinking about that 3-page short story, and then I decided to turn that into a full feature and full 85-page screenplay that I shot entirely in my own bedroom.
And this is your first full length feature film, then
Feature length.
completely done by you.
Yeah, I've been trying to make a feature film forever, but of course they all make, even the low budget ones take some type of money, and so that's really what led me to this. I came to the conclusion I just got to stop asking for permission and just do whatever I already have access to. So I shot the whole thing in my bedroom, and yeah, so it was based off of my life being a Mormon. So
Yeah. So tell us about your process of, I thought that all the actors must have been LDS, but now I'm learning not true. Tell us about how you selected the actors. They were just wonderful. And also, what the heck did they think was happening?
yeah, I'm very happy with all of them. Yeah, they did a great job. I just put up, well, I knew a couple, but I put up ads online, and I auditioned online actors. And then I originally, about 3 years ago, I did just a proof of concept with the Ronald actor, the mom, and a different Relief Society president. And it was just like a 3-minute proof of concept. And then use that to raise just a tiny bit of money, and then end up making the feature with the same mom, Ronald actor, and then a different Relief Society president. So yeah, and then so for all the other ones, I just auditioned and found them online.
And there they were. Yeah.
Well,
Landon, you
and
really
no,
do have to see it. It's just, they're just so spot on. I mean,
Well, I
they
got to think
really,
they were just like taken back, like what kind of people do this, or what was their reaction to the culture? Did they have other LDS people they knew and they were going, oh, or were they just completely like, explain this to me, or what was their thought as they're trying to portray that?
yeah, most of them were pretty blown away, like thinking this is what real Mormons really believe. Are you serious? And or used to believe or taught, and like yeah. So I think most of them were pretty blown away and had no idea about the teachings of the church. One of my buddies, he's actually in the film. He's from Idaho. He wasn't raised LDS, but he's the one that he's Brother Wood, and he sings to Ronald, and so I knew him beforehand. But he put up actually a picture of him holding the hymn book, the traditional green hymn book that we all know, and like singing from the scene. And of course, several of his Idaho Mormon buddies commented that they thought it looked pretty disrespectful of him to do that. And I actually felt kind of bad for him because he's he's an amazing guy and he doesn't want to offend anyone. But he told them that he wasn't trying to be disrespectful, and the filmmaker me was not trying to be mean or disrespectful at all. It was based on inspired by my life.
right. It's shining a spotlight on things that exist. I mean, I thought it was interesting. There was a Q&A, Landon, after the premiere, and somebody said, I'm a never Mormon. Like, these things are exaggerations, right? This is just kind of a dark comedy, right? And you could hear people, at least around me, going, nope. If you're raised in the church in a certain era, the things that have a spotlight shown on them in this movie that may be very disturbing are just the things that routinely happened to us or that we went through, or teachings that were kind of hammered at us. This was real for people growing up in a certain era. So yeah, I think when I wonder, what do you think will happen when you take this, like outside of Utah, and you just show it to more of a secular audience? I'm trying to imagine what someone would think.
I'm really curious too. I'll know. I take it to San Diego next Thursday, and it'll probably be half mixed of former Mormons and never Mormons. So that'll be interesting to see some of their takes on it.
Yeah. So for people in the Mormonish audience that may not understand even what the title Ronald's Little Factory means, maybe you can kind of explain briefly what is this talk from an LDS church leader that the entire thing was based on.
Yeah. So in 1976, the Apostle Boyd K. Packer gave a talk, and the official talk is for young men only. And it's about a 15-minute talk. I think you can still find on YouTube. And the entire talk is a anti-masturbation talk. And so the church took down the video on the general conference on their website, and supposedly it's the only video that they've ever taken down from general conference. They did that about 4 or 5 years ago, which was obviously understandable why they did that. But so it's you can watch the whole talk. I think you still can on YouTube, and most of it is hilarious and so outdated. And there's a couple parts, especially near the end, where it's a gut punch when he starts to, yeah, it turns into something really disturbing, and that's really what the film is inspired by. Like, there's a lot of funny moments, but there's some, and especially near the end, there's some gut punches that was inspired by that.
I understand you play that talk several times during the movie. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
parts
effective.
Of it several times.
Very effective the way it's done. Yeah, it absolutely is. So no, and that's the thing. It's dark, it's funny, it's a comedy, but by the end, there's a scene that just represents how completely beaten down emotionally, intellectually, sexually that you are, having gone through a high demand, high control situation as a youth. There's the scene where Ronald is just on the bed and everything's been thrown at him, including the kitchen sink, and he's just laying there, completely traumatized. And I actually teared up a little bit about that because I have my own experience with invasive bishop interviews and inappropriate comments made to me, and, getting in trouble for nothing except for going through puberty. I'm sorry, I can't help this, things like that. A lot of people did in high demand religions. I don't think it is just the LDS culture, but that scene where Ronald was just laying there overwhelmed, I just saw that, I teared up a little bit because I felt like it really represented what a lot of us internally, the scars are what we've gone through. So, but yeah, and that's, I think I wrote a review and I described it as, dark, poignant, triumphant. I mean, it had just all those different elements to it, which were wonderful. And so maybe talk a little bit, I would say the whole point is that poor Ronald, he wants to remain pure. And so he takes some other advice from another piece of literature that's out there on the LDS landscape. And it's called, is it called Steps to Avoid Masturbation? It's something like that. It's a pamphlet by Apostle Mark E. Peterson, where he writes step after step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of absolutely ridiculous, horrendous advice on how you can stop yourself from engaging in this horrifying activity. And one of the main things is, if you're really overwhelmed at night, tie your hand, I think it says in extreme cases, tie your hand to the bed frame. And so this is the advice that Ronald took. So maybe talk a little bit about how you incorporated this pamphlet. I know some people probably don't even think it's real, but it is. You can look it up online. It's by Mark E. Peterson, and it's called Steps to Overcome Masturbation. I think talk a little bit about that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that pamphlet that may or may not exist, but I mean, there's definitely the talk or whatever it is you can see online, and I think it's about 28 steps, isn't it? It's just,
yeah, that's what I mean. It's step after step after step. Yep.
And so crazy. Each step is just, there's so many crazy. So I bring up 2 steps in the film. The first one is, and the real pamphlet or the real talk, whatever it is, from Mark E. Peterson. He says that if you're tempted, you might need to think of yourself lying in a bathtub full of worms and even eating them in the process. So there's a little scene of Ronald and worms, and then the next part, which is really the whole film is inspired by this part, is as you're saying, is as in extreme cases you might have to tie your hand to the bed at night to keep yourself from masturbating. So that's what Ronald ends up handcuffing his hand to his bedpost because of that, pamphlet.
Yeah. And everything's rooted in reality. That's what I don't know if a lot of the viewers will understand. And I've been reading that pamphlet recently because the amazing RFM and I are writing a song together. We just felt this pamphlet needed to be put to music. And so he suggested, well, why don't we use the 50 Ways to Use Your Lover theme song, right? And there's so many, like keep it in your pants, Lance, don't get a snack, Mac. I mean, there's just all this advice, go eat a worm, Herm, keep the pajamas tight, Dwight. I mean, it's just ridiculous advice.
When are you releasing that? I should put that in the end credits.
I know. I feel like that. We need to finish it. We're on the last stanza, but there's just so much in there. And the advice, don't eat spicy food, dude. I mean, that's one of them. And again, we're making light of it, of course. But that somewhere out there, young men read this and keep the shower, take short showers, keep the bathroom door open a crack, Mac, in our song, right? No privacy, no nothing. You just have got to not engage in these activities. So it's funny, but it's not funny. And I think that's what Ronald's Little Factory really accomplishes. And then you also bring in you sort of spotlight some other unusual teachings of the day with some of the people that you bring in. And I can see how faithful Mormons might have a problem with that. They might say, oh, why are you bringing this up? But again, if you were raised in a certain era, these were all things that were facts to you and that you were taught. It isn't anything that's being, exaggerated or anything. So why don't you talk about some of the other people? The concept of the film is that he's trapped, Ronald, and then people come in from the ward. The mother brings people in to help him, and they each have kind of a different take on, how to help him and what they need to do. So talk about how you develop some of these other little scenes with the people coming in to talk to Ronald.
Yeah. So after the mom sees him, she ends up, they end up losing the keys, and so she ends up calling the first person, of course, the Relief Society president, who comes in, and she's obviously a crazy. She's it's pretty scary, and so just Relief Society president, and then after that, just the traditional, all the unique members that we all know, like of course, the stake president and the home teacher, and a couple of the most disturbing ones are I don't know if I would mention them right now, but yeah, there's specifically like two scenes that are probably the hardest scenes to watch in a way, and they're based by teachings that the church taught back then. They said, they're officially changed their position on these two particular things, but they're very disturbing to think about and to watch. And I had a hard time I almost changed them a bit or even took them out. But then as I had my brother read the kind of a warning, kind of a trigger. A lot of these things could be triggering, and I almost took some of them out and changed them. But as I said, had my brothers say in the notes from the filmmaker, I felt like if I were to take out some of these scenes, it would change. It would make the church look bad. Like I feel it would. It just didn't feel like it would be right. It just felt like for myself, and also I think it would make the church look better than they should look.
Yes,
so
yeah.
Well, and I didn't really feel it was even really not an overt attack on the church. I felt it was a story of someone's reaction to it, raised with all that stuff being thrown at you, with a lot of us of a certain age were. So to me, it was certainly some things maybe started out to be triggering, but then it turned out to be very cathartic. And you also, I saw myself on screen in Ronald, how his reaction was like, what do you say? What? I mean, I spent a lot of my teenage years going, what kind of teaching is this? So Ronald was kind of like in every person. And I just focused more on him and his reaction to the things that were being said. So in that way, I thought it was cathartic. So, but I can see how someone might have another reaction to it, not looking at that or not understanding that was reality for a lot of us.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of the word. It would, if I took those out or changed it, would sanitize the church and those harmful teachings. Yeah. And so that's why I left them there. And that some of it is tough, especially those specific two scenes where it's just some of the worst teachings that the church or anyone could ever teach.
Yeah. But then you also, when you'd put something like that in, then you'd kind of pull it back with humor, so it wasn't just this, oh my gosh, descent into, people were laughing. People were, where I was sitting, there was laughter, there was, visible, oh my goodness, as you recognize something, that may have happened to you as a youth. And so there were all kinds of reaction, and then there were times when it was just silent, people were taking it in or reliving something, and then I think there were moments, like I said, where I kind of teared up, kind of recognizing this young man and what he's going through. And then it has a triumphant end, which is awesome. And so in that case, you had people smiling and cheering. So it really did take you through this whole roller coaster of what I think was a lot of our childhoods as we dealt with, sexuality and the different things we had to go through in the church of a more high control nature. So
we were talking, before you got on, and Brent mentioned that this is, although he'd seen it thousands of times as he put it together, this was the first time in front of an audience that he got to see it. So
talk about that. Oh my goodness, I'd love to know.
The reaction that you had as the audience, you got to see the audience reacting to what you put together.
Yeah, and I was also telling Landon that it was the first time seeing it with an audience, but it felt like kind of the first time I was watching, because I've seen it so many times that I've grown so sick of it editing and every time I've seen it, I should change this. So I haven't been able to enjoy it for a long time, but this is the first time I just accept what it is what it is, and I'm not going to change it now. So that was really the first time in a long time that I've been able to see it clearly and just and be entertained by by again after seeing it hundreds of times. And yeah, super fun to see it with an audience and to get laughs and gasps on the parts where I was hoping.
Were there surprises? Were there places you thought this will get a big laugh and it didn't, and other places that you didn't think, or did it pretty much go where you were hoping?
One of the places that I was surprised got more laughs than I was expecting. I don't know how I could say this without saying too much, but there's a scene. There's a there's a surreal scene where Ronald has some tubes in his mouth and someone is kind of breastfeeding with tubes from his mouth, and it turns into something kind of different, more of a nightmare version of that. And I was kind of surprised that, but I am pleased that got quite a bit of laughs.
Yeah, there was a reaction to that. I mean, this is, Landon, it really is kind of a campy horror movie in a lot of ways. I mean, there are elements to it like that where you're like, oh my goodness, kind of like Spooky Mormon Hell Dream, right? In Book of Mormon the musical. That's what if I had to describe it to somebody who, had no idea, I'd say, think of that only on steroids and with more of a horror element to it. And there's a couple friends that were bringing, I should mention that this is being screened tomorrow. This is on the 26th, right, at Broovies Theater in Salt Lake, another screening. So I'm going to be there again, and I'm going to bring some friends. And one of them is a post-Mormon, but she has a nuanced husband. And so she was asking me, do you think my husband would like it? And I'm like, I'm not sure. It really does depend on the person, how open-minded they are. So I tried to kind of describe it, and I just said it's kind of like a campy horror movie, but it has a lot of truth to it, and it's cathartic. And she said, I'll watch some previews and we'll see. So she may or may not bring her husband. But what would you say to if somebody asked you that question? I'm a post-Mormon, my husband's a nuanced. Should we see it? I mean, what do you think?
I've had several active LDS members say that they thought it looked funny and they want to see it. I haven't heard of any reviews of people that are active that I certainly know most of them wouldn't like it, but I think there's a decent amount that are open-minded and like weird stuff that would appreciate it. That's interesting that you talk about the horror, the campy horror aspect, and that's really what I was going for, especially like an 80s type campy horror. And that when I wrote the script, it's a comedy, but I told all my cinematographer and my actors, I want to shoot this more like a horror film, and I want this to look more like a horror film. Let's play it more straight than just like a traditional comedy. I didn't want this to be like a 90-minute Saturday Night Live skit or just funny, like silly. I want this to be it's really inspired by some 80s horror, but it's not horror. It's a dark comedy. I call it
dark,
creepy comedy.
I think so too. And I think that you really accomplished that because the angles, were very reminiscent, like you said, of some of that 80s horror. But there's a lot of substance to it. Even though there's the horror elements and the comedy elements, there's just a lot of real substance to the whole thing. So it's certainly not just a rompy Saturday Night Live skit, not at all. But there are moments where you're laughing. Like I said, it takes you on a journey. You're laughing, you're tearing up. It's a whole, it's a gamut, I think.
The artwork for the posters and some of the stuff I've seen online is very looks very horror, 80 horror like. Who did those? It's very nice artwork. How did you come up with that, and what's the story behind the artwork with that?
Yeah, so I had a really good artist. I originally wanted to. So I drew a just very rough version of the poster, which is it's a skeleton wearing a missionary suit, and he's behind a TV, and it has his hands up he's handcuffed. And I wanted to do kind of like a creep show, 1980s horror vibe. I thought that'd be funny. And so I sent it out. There's this artist called Sadist Art Designs, and he does a lot of that type of style. And so I just sent my rough version of the sketch, and he did that. And so I really love the poster that he did. Oh, and the tagline too is, of course, on the posters, the creepy Mormon exploitation comedy that no one ever asked for is coming.
No, and I think it did its job, because when I first saw a post about it, I mean, what really drew me in was that poster. I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this? Because I try to curate all things in the Mormon landscape. I run like the Good Media Club and some other things where I kind of find things, and that right away drew me in. I said, what is this? And even from the preview, I couldn't quite tell exactly
Yeah, we
what it
had
would
some
be.
discussions
Yeah,
over it because we
let's
were
look
going,
at it. There
there
we
you go.
go.
Yes.
There we.
There's
I
a
mean,
shirt.
it's so well done. Like, you have to look and figure out what it is. You have to
Yes.
look closer when you see that.
And we kept going back and forth going, is this, should we
What
go to
is
this? And we got to go. It just
so?
looks so,
So, do you
just the
have
title
merch then?
alone.
That's a T-shirt. Do you have
not,
merch?
not yet, not yet. I
Oh
just
my God, you
have a
need
couple
to.
shirts.
I want a Ronald mug. I can see it now. Whenever you get merch, I'm getting one.
Awesome,
That
that's a good
that
idea.
is awesome. So I was going to ask a question at the premiere, but everybody else was asking questions, so I didn't have a chance. But I was wondering what you think the role of humor is in recovering from trauma like that. Because, as I said, I had, like any other LDS young woman, had all kinds of inappropriate things done and said, and I internalized a lot of it. About a year ago, my son does stand-up comedy. He said, Mom, will you open for me at this little restaurant, very small venue? And I said, okay, I wonder what I could do. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make a little comedy routine about some of the Ronald-esque things that happened to me as a young woman, inappropriate questions and leaders telling me things about, how I'm growing or developing. And so I did a little comedy routine about it, and it really made me feel a lot better. I mean, I wasn't trying to make light of it. I was just trying to process it. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you feel like the role of comedy like that can help maybe in trauma, or how you feel.
Yeah, that's a super good question. I agree. Like, I think that comedy can really help with that, and I'm hoping that was my objective. I really wanted, especially to watch these in a room full of post Mormons, that we could laugh together. And I feel like when we laugh at these things, we feel like we have beat them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
but I do understand that not everyone's ready to laugh at something. I mean, there are some of these
Yes.
are very serious things that are very disturbing that have happened and still happen. So not everyone's ready to laugh, and it's not for everyone. But I think for some people, it is a healing process to laugh at those things.
Absolutely.
You kind of have a limited audience with, most of it being a post Mormons who would appreciate it. Did you try to structure it so it was open to a wider audience, that people who weren't LDS might see it and enjoy it, or do you think that they won't understand it? Is it really kind of to a specific audience?
No, it was always just for the former Mormon audience, and luckily it just didn't really cost much money at all to make. I just shot in my bedroom, so I don't have to try to market it to a big audience. So happy just to market it towards former Mormons. But I think there's other people that have experienced religious trauma in other groups that are outside the LDS church that could enjoy it. But and also there's people that like weird cult type movies that
Yeah.
I'm hoping could enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I feel like it has a niche, and I feel like it could be a cult classic, like you say. And I feel like there's a lot of interest now. You see all kinds of documentaries on Netflix and everywhere else about, the more obscure, the FLDS or different things. I think people are becoming increasingly interested in how other people lived or were raised. So I can see it having a universal interest as sort of a niche cult classic. I can see it growing.
Yeah, this year it's been crazy how many post-Mormon,
Mm-hmm.
ex-Mormon type shows, movies there are that have
Yeah.
been marketed, on Netflix and Hulu. So it's
Yeah.
really crazy that there's it's been pretty mainstream the last year.
So
Yeah.
if
Everybody's
I want to
interested.
see it, since I'm traveling internationally and I didn't get to go to it, what are people's options to go and see the movie at this point?
So it's going to be premiere. It's showing at Broovies tomorrow at 2:30 in Salt Lake City, and then on next Thursday, March 2nd, it will be shown in my hometown at 7:30 p.m. March 2nd in San Diego. And then a week after that, I'm going to be doing 2 screenings at the Idaho Film Festival. That is, it's a little town in Southern California, kind of near Palm Springs, out in the mountains. And there'll be 2 screenings up there around March 8th and 10th, I think. And then after that, I'm going to decide I might, I think I definitely would like to do a St. George
Yes.
showing, and I might come back up here in
Yep.
the next 2 months. And I also thought of maybe going to Idaho, Arizona, other Mormon centric places, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of interest. I mean, you were on Mormonism Live last week, and there were tons of viewers, tons of comments, so much interest. And I've been posting about it. I actually had somebody ask today on my the Good Media Club site that said, "Hey, is it ever coming to St. George?" And I said, "I think it is, because didn't you talk about to Bill Reel about maybe hosting when you come there?" So
Yeah,
I feel like it's going to get traction. I really feel like it is. I think word of mouth is going to get out there, and I think that it's going to continue to move along. So I think
And
that's
eventually
great.
it'll
thank
be
you.
available for rent, or do you
Yeah,
have any?
eventually, I'm probably this summer and the next few months it will. After I decide what other theatrical runs I want to do. But yeah, eventually, certainly in a few months.
That is great. So do you feel like the screening tomorrow maybe even probably bigger than the one on Thursday? I mean, there were a lot of people there on Thursday, but I feel like maybe Salt Lake, maybe that's where more of your audience is. What do you think?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
We'll see. And there's no
Yeah,
snowstorm. We have to say there was a giant snowstorm on the night of the premiere, right? So
yeah,
we're all struggling to get there, but it was really worth it. So
yeah. I'm glad it wasn't the day before. That would have been awful when
oh,
it was bad
yeah, there were a lot of
snowstorm.
events canceled on that day, so that was not good. So now that you've seen it in its entirety, like you said, you're sick of it. But now that you're watching it and you're seeing the audience reaction, is there anything that you didn't put in that you wish that you would? Or I mean, I'm guessing there are some scenes that went to the cutting room floor, right? Or maybe not.
Yeah, there was a couple. Originally I had a love interest for Ronald that would have added like 13 minutes, but I
Okay.
cut that out. It was already 90 minutes and it just stuck in one room.
Yeah.
It shouldn't go longer than 90 minutes. There's originally had a little bit different ending. I wish I could have done. It's very similar, but an extra part of the ending. But it's really hard logistically when there's no money. Like everyone is just it's just so fast, uh and then yeah, and there's several things of dialogue that I took out. I think the first cut was like 2 hours and 15 minutes. So
Oh,
I cut it down by
had to cut it down.
cut a lot, quite a bit of the dialogue that was repetitive, I thought.
Yeah. No, I love the ending. The ending was very inspiring. It reminded me of a really inspiring 80s movie. You know what I mean? Where it seems like always in the 80s movie, there's like, all right, fine, that's it. I'm just, and they just
Come
kind of
out
take
holding the
off to their
jukebox
new
over
life.
their head,
Yeah, no, just like that.
the
It was just like it.
stereo
Yeah.
over their head.
Yeah, exactly. Where they're just like, that's it. I'm casting off my own life, my old life, and everybody that told me everything, and I am moving ahead. It seemed like that was always like in a John Hughes movie or something. That's always the ending, right? Somebody just finally had it and they move on. That's why I said it was triumphant. I felt you'll have to see it, Landon. We won't give it away, but it was a very unusual triumphant scene, but it worked and it was great. I was going, yes, it was good.
Yeah,
It was
John
really
Hughes
good.
is another inspiration. Actually, I like that you brought that up. John Hughes and 80s,
Yeah.
or um,
Yep.
actually, I was going to tell you one of the scenes that are one of the parts that I went back and forth on cutting is just actually just one line of dialogue. Is I kept it in there. I felt like the entire film. So I never try to be mean towards the LDS Church, and I felt like there was never any. I tried not to do any gotcha moments like, oh, that like it's just too easy, and like so every moment is something from Ronald's perspective.
Yes.
So even like there's a couple scenes that are inspired, from the temple, and even I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just from Ronald's perspective, never trying to be mean. But there's this one line in there. The only line I feel that kind of breaks that rule is when the father. I feel like it's a gotcha moment that I kept in. It's the father tells is talking about Joseph Smith, and he says, um, talking about the law of chastity. He said Joseph Smith was, what's the line? He said Joseph Smith was basically he said he never broke the law of chastity, and
he was faithful to one woman.
He was faithful to one
there
wife.
were a lot of groans where I was sitting. People were like, "Oh my goodness!"
Yeah, it's just one wife, and he was never unfaithful to Emma, and he kept on the straight and narrow up until the day he died.
Right.
I felt like that was definitely a gotcha moment, but I took out sometimes, but I felt like, oh, that's still, and also at that particular line or that particular scene, it adds a little bit of levity. That's a really intense scene. I felt like that adds a little levity.
That was the father. It almost seemed like the guests that came in, it just kind of got progressively more intense a little bit, So when the father finally showed up to try to give him the key and talk to him, that was definitely took more of a dark turn. You're right. And then that's when you saw Ronald really just kind of internalize it and receding and just, almost mentally, he just really could hardly take it anymore when the father was talking to him. So yeah, that line definitely added. And there were a lot of people around me going, "Oh my goodness," but that would have been the father's belief though. I mean, it wasn't even exaggerated. And Ronald would have been going, "Wait, I don't his whole look the whole time is kind of like, what?" Like most of us were growing up, right? What is happening to us? So
it's so interesting because like in the 80s, I always, thought of Emma Smith. I kind of taught it as a traitor.
Yeah, she was negative portrayal. Yeah. Absolutely. We don't talk about
really
her.
Changed. Yeah, that really changed. Like probably mid 90s.
Yes.
And now it's completely reversed.
Yep. No, and that's what I mean. It may be generational. People who are 20 years younger than I am may watch this and go, "Oh, that what an interesting. It's made up. It's fiction." Whereas somebody my age will go, "No, that's pretty accurate in every single thing I was learned and taught." So I think it has a different
it's unfortunate. Because we grew up with that Marky Peterson, the Boyd K. Packer, Miracle of Forgiveness by Spencer W. Kimball. Those were the defining things that defined how you were to act as a youth, and it set that tone. And they're all now pretty much in fact, I think the church has disavowed all three of those. But that was our world growing up. That is what we were taught. That's what we were told to do. And now they've disavowed all of it as if, sorry about that mistake, you don't get your youth back, No,
well, that's the guilt we felt. We felt the guilt over all those things. And now we're being told, "Oh, no, we never really meant to say that. That wasn't what it meant." But we lived that guilt extremely.
Yeah. Landon, what's funny? You mentioned the Miracle of Forgiveness. It's about 2 hours before the premiere. I'm staying at my brother Danny's house, and I had to write something down, and so I went to a bookshelf. I didn't look what book it was. I just went to write something down, and I started writing on this book, and I lifted up the paper, and I noticed it was the Miracle of Forgiveness. Like literally 2 hours before I'm showing it, and then of course I read the the fun controversial parts and I just blown away. Like just some of the stuff that says.
So damaging.
It's really
That's what
sick.
I mean. It's just so incredibly really damaging.
So sick.
And somebody in the audience during the Q&A raised their hand and said, "I was actually in the audience at the Boyd K. Packer Little Factory talk."
Yeah, that was crazy.
And so then afterwards, it turned out to be a person in our book club, the Good Book Club. I did not know. His name is Kent. And so I talked to him a little bit about it. I said, "So you were actually there?" He said, "Yeah, I was a youth. I was sitting there in that meeting." And I said, "What did people think about that? I mean, did it raise any eyebrows?" And he goes, "Absolutely not. It was what we'd been told by every other source out there." And basically the concept of the talk was just, your body operates like a factory. You don't touch it or do anything. It's doing its own thing. To interfere with the factory is interfering with God, kind of. It was just a ridiculous metaphor. And then, as you said, it got much darker later in the talk where they, started saying all these things that would happen to you if you did. But this man said, "No, we didn't think anything about it because it was right in line with everything else we were told every day, all the time by our leaders and our teachers, and didn't raise an eyebrow whatsoever." And like you say, Landon, now that's pretty much all disavowed. They're saying, "We didn't really say that," or "We didn't mean it," or "You might have misunderstood it," which is the most frustrating of all, I think. Yeah. No, we didn't misunderstand.
That's the worst when they say, "Yo, you misunderstood," or "We never taught that."
Yeah.
Like what they about us becoming gods. We never taught that. That's the most mind-blowing thing that they now say that.
Yeah, no, we're going to do a Mormonish episode on that. We're collecting all kinds of places where they did flat out say that. And now we're being told we misunderstood it. But No, it was taught to us in classes. Jokes were made about it. When I make my planet, or, when I populate my planet with my wives, the guys would say, and it was just certainly something that was, that we all thought was going to happen. So
even in the miracle of forgiveness, when I was just reading that, it's that our entire purpose is, I can't remember exact wording, but our entire purpose is to become just as God.
Yeah.
Literally in miracle of forgiveness.
And you still do that in the temple. So I don't know how they can say they don't teach that, because that's what you covenant to become in the
I think temple. It's being like God as opposed to being a God. I think that's kind of what they're hanging the hat on, but it's a very fine distinction, and a lot of people misunderstand. So
yeah, we know what they said though.
We know things are changing.
And you've documented it on film now, so there's no
that's exactly right. I was going to say it's important for people of a certain age, we're older than you are, obviously, Brent, but to say this is how it was and this was real. For someone like you to put it in a film and say, this is what we were taught. This was a reality, because otherwise it gets lost down the memory hole. I read something today that said in 20 years, children probably won't know anything about the Book of Mormon or Joseph Smith. Just the way they're the person had mentioned, this was just on social media, that in the current Liahona, the church magazine this month, there was no mention of Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon. It was all Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And they were saying, I wonder if, in the future, they're just backing away from certain problematic things. I can see it.
That's what I've been saying for probably 15 years, that it's either going to go down that, which it seems like it's going down that road, is that just completely get rid of Joseph Smith and that become much more mainstream Christian, or could become the opposite, or more like Ethel, really fundamentalist, that just very scared that it's going the other way. So maybe they'll be FLDS. Like
what are the conversations in your household like? I mean, you've got a brother, David, who was a seminary and wanted to be institute, and went all and learned it. He's written a great book on a documentary hypothesis and stuff.
Yeah.
What is the dynamic at the family conversations on that? You said you still have some members that are in and some that are out. That's really quite a large group there, large spread.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of more just don't like in front of the active LDS church members. I just not talk about it too much. So, but yeah, obviously around my brothers that have both left, we bring up stuff often, and we all get along great, and I get along great with my active members too. We just don't bring up too much stuff about church.
Keep it separate.
Yeah.
Your grandma was at the premiere. Isn't that funny, Landon? Grandma was there, and she raised
92 years old.
How old is she?
92.
92. Yeah, she just made such a cute comment. You could tell she's just so proud of you, and it was just really cute to have a grandma at that premiere. I just think that's great.
I was staying at my grandma's house at the time, and I shot it at her house. It was in my bedroom, and she had to put up with us filming there for 7 days, and it was just kind of a crazy. And it was just during the middle of the pandemic, so it was a pretty wild time. But yeah, she's amazing and super supportive.
Oh, that's so fun. That's just amazing. So let me see. I think I'll ask one last question, and then we'll have you for sure tell everybody like what website, where can they access the film? Where can they follow it? Where can they look at it so that, keep up where it's going to be? So I think, and then maybe Landon, you have a last question. I think my last question would be, what do you just hope for audience members, that people that see it, what do you hope it does for them or accomplishes, or that they take away from it?
Well, I love that the paragraph that you talked about, that you wrote was, and you mentioned a roller coaster, but the paragraph, what did you say? You said Ronald's Little Factory is a funny, dark, disturbing, poignant, and triumphant all at once. And so I think that hopefully that's like my ideal, is to have people go in there and to laugh and to cringe and to gasp and to have a quick gut punch, but then to come out feeling hopefully liberated and not too traumatized. But as I said, it's not, if you're not ready to laugh at some of those things, it's not ready. It's not for everyone, but the people that are, I hope they feel liberated and can enjoy it.
Yeah. And I thought it was cathartic. And I also noticed that people in the audience afterwards were talking amongst themselves, because it's almost like you go in there, you see something, it's a shared experience. You find out I had a shared experience in my youth, like the person next to me. So I was sitting next to Clint Martin, and we're like, oh my gosh, because of the catalyst of the film, we were able to kind of just like laugh or sort of commiserate with each other about the things that we'd gone through. So it was definitely a bonding experience. I felt with other people in the audience, you felt like you'd been through something and you had come from a common place and now you were watching this. So that's the part that I love. So I absolutely agree with that. So Landon, do you have any final thoughts? And then we'll let him tell us everywhere that we can possibly reach this, because we want people to see it if they're ready.
I guess the last question I'd have is, it sounded almost like you didn't really write this for an audience. It sounds like you said it was your story, almost like you wrote it for yourself. Can you just, what did you learn from it, and how did it change it? And did you get out of it what you hoped to when you started it?
Yeah, I mean, I did write it for myself, but I guess that's really what I do. Really, anytime I write, but I hope that other people can enjoy it. And I think because I hope there's a lot of other people like me that that like this type of weird stuff. But yeah, I really didn't think, as I was writing, I wasn't thinking about as an audience, just thinking what are some of the doctrine things that most disturb me, and then trying to get inside Ronald's mindset in the late 1980s and what would he be thinking about as he has all these crazy members from the church. So I just really tried to get inside his mindset, and really it almost felt like it wrote itself, because just once I came up with the characters, I just feel like I knew exactly what they're going to say to Ronald, and then what Ronald would say, because I'm Ronald. So what I would say to them, what I would do, and then what the wild things that they would say back to him.
So it's pretty autobiographical, as a lot of, I think, those movies in the 80s were, just kind of working out your stuff. So this is just great. So tell everybody where they can see it tomorrow, if there's a website, and we'll also include links in the show notes. And let's get the word out. This is worth seeing.
Cool.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, so just go on Facebook and look up Ronald's Little Factory. You can follow the Facebook page there, and you can see the latest showings. And you can follow, you can find the link to the screenings. You could also look up Eventbrite, where you get the tickets. Look up Ronald's Little Factory on Eventbrite, and that's where the tickets are being sold. And yeah, so it's the main page is on Facebook right now, Ronald's Little Factory. And then the San Diego screening will be March 2nd. It's a Thursday night, 7:30, and that'll be hosted by Alicia Lee. She does some really cool ex-Mormon, post-Mormon TikToks.
Okay.
And the screening tomorrow will be hosted. That is the one in Broovies in Salt Lake City. That'll be hosted by my former missionary companion. So will be a fun time. And he's a
family affair. It's great.
Yeah.
That is fabulous.
And then the week after the San Diego one, that will be in Idaho. That will be March 8th and 10th, I believe.
Okay. And then we're hoping it'll come back this way. Cause like I said, I've had some comments saying, please, St. George. So we are going to air this episode like literally an hour after we're taping it. So we will be airing it today on Saturday. So everybody within the sound of my voice, Broovies tomorrow, if you're in the area, Salt Lake City, I'm going to be there. I mean, it sounds like there's going to be a big crowd. It's at 2:30 in the afternoon. We'll put all the links and everything in the show notes, but if you're looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon, it's just hard to describe. You just have to come and see. I think that's all we can say. So thank you so much, Brent, for talking to us. And this is, I feel like this is just kind of the beginning of, I don't know, just the notice for this film and where it's going to go. Don't you kind of feel like that, Landon? I feel like it's.
Oh yeah. I'm ready to see it. I'm excited to see it. I'm waiting for it to come back. So,
well, if you ever come back from Korea in the bunker that you're in,
that's right.
Maybe that's right. Landon said he's going to miss it tomorrow, but I'm going to be able to go again. So, all right, everybody. Well, I guess we'll sign off from Mormonish. Please like and subscribe. And again, if you're in the area, let's get on over to Broovies tomorrow. Seriously, this is going to be really, really awesome. So thanks again, Brent. Bye,
thanks
everybody,
for having me,
guys. Mormonish. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.